Welcome, class. This is Political Science 200, American National Government. Today we will be going over your rights to life, liberty, and property. Right. Okay, now, just to start off on a broad philosophical note, right? What does the Declaration of Independence say are some of your inalienable rights?
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Exactly, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was John Locke that actually said life, liberty, and property. And so when Thomas Jefferson was writing the Declaration of Independence, he relied on John Locke. It's heavily dependent on Locke, but he changed property to pursuit of happiness. So
then it's not plagiarism.
Yeah, exactly. Then it's not plagiarism, right? Keep in mind this time, plagiarism wasn't as much of a technical issue as it is today. All right. So let's talk about citizenship rights for a minute. All persons born in the U.S., except children born to foreign ambassadors and ministers, are citizens of this country regardless of the citizenship of their parents. So, Natalie.
Yes.
You were born in the United States of America.
So you guys tell me.
Yep. At the time you were born, was your mother a U.S. citizen?
Nope.
No. What country was she a citizen of? Canada, right? We gotta watch those Canadians. They're sneaky. So anyway,
Delicious.
yeah. Anyway, but you were born on U.S. soil, so are you automatically a U.S. citizen?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Now, this is sometimes called birthright citizenship, right? So the concern right now in the United States is one that Trump talks about a lot, is when people enter the country illegally and then have a child on U.S. soil. Is that child, according to U.S. law, is that child a U.S. citizen?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, even though their parents entered illegally. See, now your mom was here illegally, right?
Yep.
When she gave birth to you. The big concern is when people enter the country illegally and then they have a child on U.S. soil. That child is automatically a U.S. citizen. Why is that child automatically a U.S. citizen? Was a law passed that made this happen, or?
I think that's just the way it is.
It's actually in the 14th Amendment.
Oh.
Yes, right. All persons born in the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction are automatically U.S. citizens, right? So it's the 14th Amendment. So, if you don't like this policy, what do you need to change?
The 14th Amendment.
The 14th Amendment. And how do you do that?
By changing it.
By passing another constitutional amendment. Absolutely. Just like we did with prohibition, right? Passed the 18th Amendment, outlawing alcohol. After some experience with that, we decided that all the organized crime that came with that, decided that wasn't a good thing. And so we passed the 21st Amendment repealing prohibition, right? So basically, if people don't like that policy, then they need to amend the U.S. Constitution in order to change it. Now, citizenship may also be acquired by naturalization, a legal action conferring citizenship on an alien, right? when they say you're a naturalized citizen, that means you weren't born a U.S. citizen. You became a U.S. citizen through that process. Do you have to take a test in order to become a naturalized citizen?
Yeah, don't you?
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Apparently it's really hard. Like,
Well,
you can't pass it.
yeah, and actually, there's, I wish the whole class were here. We could discuss this a little more, but everyone thinks it's like a set test with a set number of questions. It's not. The immigration officials actually have some discretion in which questions they ask you, and they vary quite a bit in difficulty. So that's maybe a cause for concern. But anyway, now, unless things have changed, in order to become a U.S. citizen, do you have to renounce your allegiance to another country when you become a naturalized U.S. citizen?
I think so, yeah.
Yes, you do. You have to renounce your allegiance to any previous country. How does that strike you?
I don't like that.
No, I don't like it either, right? And it was one of the reasons why my wife didn't become a U.S. citizen for so long. Because she was here legally. Like I said, don't call the immigration cops. she was here legally. But she was a lawful permanent resident. She didn't become a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why is she didn't want to renounce her allegiance to Canada. Canada had been very good to her, had provided good health care, good education, a nice living environment, freedom, all growing up, and she didn't necessarily want to renounce her allegiance to Canada. Now, again, since we are talking about citizenship, and I've dealt with a lot of these issues personally, because the Trump administration was playing hardball with citizenship, a couple summers ago, my wife decided she was just going to get her citizenship taken care of because both of her parents, even though they're Canadian, are U.S. citizens also. So she said, I'm just going to go get it taken care of. So she went up to the U.S. Embassy in Calgary. They looked at all the documentation. They looked at the citizenship status of her parents. They looked at where her parents were born, where her parents' were born, all these types of things. And they said, you've always been a U.S. citizen. And they gave her...
Lies. As long as you say A.
Yeah. They gave her U.S. passport and said, you've always been a U.S. citizen. And that's the only evidence she has that she is a U.S. citizen is her passport. So we keep that in a fireproof document box safe in our house. Crazy stuff. Okay, so now today, with minor exceptions, non-enemy aliens over age 18 who have been lawfully admitted for permanent residence and who have resided in the U.S. for at least 5 years and in the state for at least 6 months are eligible for naturalization. So again, I'll use my wife as an example. She was married to me. So was she a lawful permanent resident?
Yes.
For a long time. Yep. She was in the country for at least 5 years. She was in the state for at least 6 months. So she could have very easily gone through the naturalization process at some point. But decided to take care of it by going to Canada and going through the embassy because both of her parents were U.S. citizens. So there's different processes, I guess, is one of the points I'm making here, depending on the citizenship status of your parents and that type of thing. Now let's talk about dual citizenship. That's citizenship in more than one country, right? Okay, yeah. So my daughter Natalie, who is participating today, She is a dual citizen. She is technically a citizen of both the United States and Canada. Canada is kind of really kind of liberal with their granting of dual citizenship, right? Now, it's kind of weird because, again, go back to your mom. Mm-hmm. Say her parents weren't U.S. citizens, right? But she was married to me.
Yep. And
she wanted to become a U.S. citizen. Would she, as we discussed, if her parents were not U.S. citizens, in order to become a U.S. citizen herself, would she have to renounce her allegiance to Canada?
Yes.
Yeah, so she could not have been a dual citizen in that situation. Now, because her parents were U.S. citizens, and the embassy said you've always been a U.S. citizen, now is she considered a dual citizen?
I guess so.
Yeah, I guess so. Right, exactly. And so it's a little odd the way you can or can't become a dual citizen. You think it'd be a little more consistent, but there are some issues there. But anyway, Canada usually has no problem granting dual citizenship. When your mom and I were getting married, we had to decide whether we were going to get married in Canada or the U.S. We wanted to know our options on where to live, a lot of stuff. And we said, what if we get married in the U.S.? Would we still be able to go up to Canada, and could I become a Canadian citizen? And Canada said, we don't break up families. Right?
Yeah, sounds like Canada.
Yeah, it does. It's we don't break up families. I'm like, all right, go Canada. Then, you've heard this story before, but my students haven't, so here you go, students. Like 1 week before my wife and I were supposed to get married, I was visiting her up in Canada, and we had gotten everything in order. We were told months ago that if we got married in Canada, we could come back down to the U.S., and she could apply for citizenship or lawful permanent residence when she was here in the U.S., right? We'd been told that for months. This was back in 1995. And the week before we were supposed to get married, I was crossing the border, and it was going to be the same border we were going to have to cross after we get married. So after we got married, so I decided, I'm just going to check in with the actual people that we will be dealing with as we try to cross the border as husband and wife and come back into the United States. And so I said, hi, I'm Carl Doerfler. I called a few months ago. We were told we could get married in Canada and then go into the U.S. and my wife could apply for lawful permanent residence or that type of thing once she entered the U.S. And they said, that policy's just been changed. If you guys get married in Canada, your wife, who is a Canadian citizen, will not be able to enter the United States for 6 months. And so we had to change our entire wedding week before. Week before it happened, we had to move it from Canada down to Idaho. It was a nightmare. But we had to change the whole thing. And all because they changed the policy, right?
Mm-hmm. And Nancy was not happy.
No, my wife wasn't happy, Yeah, a lot of planning had gone into that, and for it to get changed right before was really frustrating and disappointing for her. So, anyway, dual citizenship's kind of a trip. Also, another point of that story, Congress has a lot of latitude over who enters the country, under what conditions, and that type of thing. So that takes us to the next point. The right to live and travel in the U.S. is perhaps the most precious aspect of American citizenship. Aliens have no such right. As I was saying with my story, even though my wife was married to me, did she have the right to enter the United States? Nope. So, does the U.S. break up families?
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes in that situation.
I'm not completely a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
You can always flee.
Yeah, as opposed to Canada, who, like I said, they said we don't break up families. Okay, next, the right to international travel can be regulated within the bounds of due process, right? Can the federal government prohibit travel to Cuba?
Yep.
Yeah, they can. And they did for a long time. Why? I thought you were free as a U.S. citizen to come and go as you please.
No, you are not.
No, you're not. Totally, right? Yeah. Why are you not free to, for a number of years, why were you not free to go to Cuba as you pleased?
I don't remember the reason.
Well, the national security reasons.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, basically, we had economic sanctions against Cuba. And an island nation like Cuba is heavily dependent on tourism for its survival, right? It's not like they have a ton of natural resources like the United States. In the United States, do we have oil?
Yes.
Yes. Do we have a lot of agriculture?
Yes.
Do we have a lot of minerals?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we have a lot of natural resources in the United States. Island nations, a lot of the time, have very few to no marketable natural resources. And so we imposed economic sanctions on Cuba for a long time. And the idea was we'll make them suffer economically. And eventually they'll change their policies, change their regime, stop being fascinated by communism, and stop being so loyal to Fidel Castro. And that was the idea. On a side note, how'd that work out? Did we starve them into submission? No. They're still driving around their 1950s cars, enjoying the beautiful weather and beaches and sunshine. Oh, well. Yeah, so imposing economic sanctions didn't work so well. A lot of Cubans went on and were content with what they had, I guess. So, all right. This is kind of law, but stick with me. The Constitution protects many rights of all persons, not just American citizens. Okay, so go back to the 14th Amendment.
Yes.
No state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
Doesn't say citizen.
Doesn't say citizen, it says person, right? Nor denied any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws, right? So that's critical, the fact that it says person and not citizen, right? So you're entitled to due process, even if you're not a U.S. citizen. That's what the 14th Amendment suggests. All right. Despite that, Congress has denied most federally assisted benefits to illegal immigrants and has permitted states to deny many other benefits, making an exception only for emergency medical care, disaster relief, and some nutrition programs. Right? Okay, so let's go back to our hypothetical situation of illegal aliens. Say that it's a married couple. They enter the U.S. illegally, and they have a child on U.S. soil, right? Is that child a U.S. citizen?
Yep.
Yes. Well, now, we as a country have a very difficult decision to make. Do you send the two parents back and separate them from their child and leave the child to become dependent on the state or relatives or who knows what?
It's messy.
It does get messy. Or do you let the parents live here illegally? Or do you let them stay here and have some expedited citizenship process? What do you think?
I think that it's important to keep the family together. I don't think you should separate the kid from the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And also, aren't we all immigrants?
Yeah, to some extent. See, that's the other big debate that often gets overlooked or neglected with immigration policy is how easy do we want to make legal immigration, right?
Yeah.
Because if you just show up at the border and say, I want in, and we say, okay, well, that's about as easy as you can make it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so a question that often gets overlooked is, well, how easy do we want to make legal immigration? And the argument could be made, why not make it as easy as possible? The people who show up here have demonstrated at least some ambition, right, to make it here. My grandparents are both immigrants. On my dad's side, on my mom's side, it goes back a little farther. My mom actually had ancestors who came over on the Mayflower, as they say. Literally. But, but my dad's parents are both immigrants, and they met at a society for German speakers, right? Well, were they turned around at the border? Nope. They showed up. Hey, we're here from Germany, Austria, that area. And they were let in, and there it is. So, I don't know. So the point of that is, going back to the example, illegal aliens, child is a U.S. citizen. Should that child be eligible for nutrition programs?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. U.S. citizen, yeah, that type of thing. And so those are the types of decisions we have to make. Because if the child's a U.S. citizen, the parents aren't, and you make it too easy for the parents to become U.S. citizens, then people will say, well, you're rewarding people for illegal activity, for entering the country illegally and having a child on U.S. soil. And it's only a matter of time till word gets back to other countries that's our policy, and then you're going to see more of that. So some people make that argument. All right. Now, the Supreme Court has held that states cannot constitutionally exclude children of undocumented aliens from the public schools or charge their parents tuition. Okay, so again, the whole child that is a U.S. citizen, even though the parents are here illegally, is that child allowed to go to school?
Yes.
Yes. Can their parents be charged tuition?
No.
No. Can't do that. type of thing. Children that are born on U.S. soil are citizens, and they are allowed to go to public schools even though their parents haven't really paid into the system over the years, right? Have your mom and I paid a lot of money in property taxes over the years? Yep. Not only on this house, but the one we have up in Alabaster that we don't even live in. You know, so
For a better school.
enjoy the nice fields, Thompson. Glad we could help you out with that. Anyway.
We're not there.
No. So, I'm gonna go. Aliens do not have a constitutional right to enter the U.S. Right? There it is. Congress has wide discretion in setting the numbers, terms, and conditions under which aliens can enter and stay in the U.S. So, can Congress grant work visas for people from certain industries with certain skills? For example, computer programmers. Yeah, it seems like we're always looking for computer programmers, you know, and so they'll grant work visas for that. Now, it's always interesting to compare U.S. policy to other countries' policy, like Canada. Canada is very similar in a lot of ways to us. Colder, but similar, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, Canada will allow you in if you plan on starting up a business that will provide jobs for Canadians.
Smart.
Well, yeah, it is kind of smart. So say you can show you have the capital to start a certain type of business. It's going to probably need 20 Canadian employees. They'll let you in. All right? Canada's smart that way. All right? Now, another example of who we let in is we let a lot of people in on student visas. They have to take a certain number of credits. For example, registered for at least 9 hours.
Yeah, you can't just take one class.
Yeah. Right.
I'm a student.
Yeah, I'm a student. Exactly. See, now this became a big issue after 9/11 because, and I don't know the exact details on this, but a number of the 9/11 conspirators were here on student visas, right? Yeah, I know. And so after 9/11, the federal government really tightened up on student visas. Now, before we get into the details of this, let's talk a side note for just a second. Why, from a purely selfish standpoint, why would the United States want to grant student visas to really bright students from other countries?
So that they're gonna take our positions so that they'll be here and then we'll prosper as a nation and we can take credit for all their hard work and actual talent and then slap the label on them that they're American.
Absolutely. So from a purely selfish standpoint, you know, it's don't believe what the Statue of Liberty says. Give us your poor, your huddling masses, your to be free. From a purely selfish standpoint, give us your best and your brightest. Right? And so student visas are great because a lot of people that come to the U.S. on student visas wind up staying here. Did your mom wind up staying here?
Yes.
Yes. She married me. Wound up staying here in the United States. And your mom's really bright, right? So, back to what happened after 9/11. After 9/11, there was kind of an overreaction.
Paranoia.
Yeah. because people were, felt threatened, and they're like, what was going on? Why weren't these student visas being more closely monitored? And so there was a guy in my PhD program. His name was Quan Lee, right?
Yeah.
And see, earning your PhD is an interesting thing. You have to take a certain amount of coursework, right? And then you take your preliminary exams. And if you pass those, then you work on your dissertation. Basically, are you listening to me?
Yes.
After you take a certain number of classes and you take those preliminary exams, usually you only register for 1 credit so that you're technically a student, because all you're really doing at that point is working on your dissertation.
You're writing.
Well, and doing research for your dissertation, not just writing.
Yeah.
There's more to your dissertation than writing it. There's original research. So, after 9/11, they changed it and said, you can't just register for that 1 credit. You have to register for 9 credits. And
Right.
I know. And he had to pay for that. And he was not counting on that. So, if you were Quan,
I'd be pissed.
well, you'd be really upset. Exactly. And so he was really disappointed and frustrated about that, and it was a financial hardship for him. And Bob Gates, who was the president of Texas A&M at the time, later became Secretary of Defense for George W. Bush. And he signed my diploma on my PhD.
Wow.
Yeah.
Way to flex on all of this.
Kind of cool, eh? But anyway, Bob Gates, who was the president of Texas A&M at the time, he wrote an open letter to the New York Times, I think it was, saying, if the federal government continues with this policy, you are going to lose the best and brightest students that are coming to this country to take advantage of our world-class university system. And we will suffer in the long run because of that.
Did they listen?
I honestly don't know if they changed it, but the point is Congress can change the conditions under which people enter the U.S. and can stay in the U.S. That's the point of that example, right?
Yes.
So is it now? I don't know. But they changed it in the middle of Quan earning his PhD.
Hope Quan's doing okay.
Yeah, Quan's a great guy. I hope he is doing well also.
Did he get his PhD?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now let's talk about property rights. So this isn't a big heading here, property rights. The framers of the Constitution wanted to establish a government strong enough to protect people's rights to use and enjoy their property while limiting government so it could not endanger that right. So, property is a car, a piece of property.
If I paid for it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's your property. You own it. Are you allowed to drive it as fast as you want on public roads?
No.
No. Why not?
Because there's restrictions and you're putting other people at risk.
Right. Exactly. And so you have the right to own certain types of property, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can use them however you see fit. Right? In class, we've discussed a number of times that the state's police powers are pretty broad, right? The state, the government, and the state, the actual state of Alabama, or other states, they're allowed to pass laws that protect your health, safety, and welfare, right? Those are broadly called the state's police powers. And so those protecting the health, safety, and welfare of citizens is always a legitimate or even compelling government interest, protecting the safety of citizens. So you can't drive your car however you see fit, right?
Yeah.
You, depending on the state you're in, like California, you can't use fireworks.
Or model rockets.
Yeah. That's a sad story. The reason my mom or daughter is bringing that up is, at the elementary school near where my parents lived, one summer we were lighting rockets. Having a good time. And launching these rockets, and they went really high, didn't it? Yeah. It was kind of cool. And then, and that was fun. It was a blast. No pun intended. But then a little while later, a young man, extremely talented, bright young man, was designing this new type of rocket fuel or something. He had he was 17 years old, a senior at local high school, Thousand Oaks High School. He had a full tuition scholarship to, I think it was like Brown University, an Ivy League school. Wasn't it Brown?
I think it was Brown.
I think it was Brown. And he was working on this science project. You hate to call it science fair project because it trivializes it, but it was some kind of, science competition. That's probably a better word for it, science competition. And he was working on this particular type of rocket fuel, some type of propellant. And he was through doing his test for a day and walking back, and he still had a certain amount of the fuel, and it exploded. It blew the young man up, unfortunately. And so, wasn't it the whole town after that? Didn't they pass a city ordinance outlining rockets or rocket fuel or something like that?
I think they did, but I think they did it before that.
Yeah.
Because it was a fire hazard.
Yeah.
Right after we went to do it, they passed it because we were a fire hazard.
Yeah, I'm not so sure it's because of us. So this takes us to our next point. We talked about it before, but I'll state it explicitly. Police powers are inherent powers of state governments to pass laws to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. So, in other words, while exercising its police powers, the government can limit your ability to use your property as you see fit. They can also require you as an individual to do certain things. Right now, are we being quarantined?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, we are. Can we go to public playgrounds right now?
I don't think so.
No. Can we be in groups larger than 10 people? Nope. And so, as I said before, the quarantine really drives home the fact that the state's police powers to protect its inherent powers to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens are really broad. And so we're all living through that right now. So that's probably the best example possible I can give. Right? Now, say there's an immunization that comes along for COVID-19, and everyone needs to get it in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of every other citizen. Can the government compel us to take the vaccine?
Apparently, but I'm not taking it.
Well,
I've watched I Am Legend.
Yeah, I Am Legend, exactly. The coronavirus is elegant. But anyway, okay, now this takes us to eminent domain. This is the power of government to take private property for public use. Owners must be provided with just compensation for property so taken. So, the government can take your property, but they must provide you with just compensation, which is what a reasonable buyer would pay to a reasonable seller at the time that the government takes the property from you. So, the Fifth Amendment says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So what's the classic example of public use?
Freeways.
Freeways, absolutely. Very good. That is the classic example of when the government uses its eminent domain powers. Roads, or when it needs to widen a road, or whatever it is. They're allowed to come onto your property as long as they provide you just compensation. Now, say they plan on building a road right through my property, my home. Not just over the land, but my home. Can they take my home even though I don't want to sell it and build a road right through it?
Yep.
Yes, they can, right? So this is arguably one of the government's strongest powers. Its eminent domain powers, right? Because our house right now, according to Zillow, is worth like $180,000 or something like that, right? But I'd never sell it for that much, right? Yeah. Why would I not sell my house for $180,000?
Well, one thing, we have the kickboard in the backyard.
Well, exactly. It's like, you can't buy what I've got. I built a kickboard in the backyard.
You planted all your trees.
I planted an orchard, which are now mature and bearing a lot of fruit.
And like 100 pine trees.
I've planted over 100 trees in the yard. Over 100. When we bought this house, it was the house, and they put 15 feet of sod around the house, and that was it. We didn't have anything else, and I planted over 100 trees, which we like for the shade and your hammock.
Yeah, my hammock.
And we have the pool, and we've done the pool area exactly how I like it, and we have the area where we can play soccer and dribble, and the kickboard, and the trampoline, and the swing set, and the fire pit. Yeah. And the whole point is, if someone were to come and offer me $180,000 for this property, what would I say?
You'd say heck no.
I'd say heck no, man. There's so much that I've put into this house and sentimental value, and there's no way. Yeah. But that's the thing with the eminent domain is the government can come and take it, plow through, your house, your pool, your kickboard, your trampoline, your swing set, your fire pit, your orchard, your 100 trees, and take it. And so it's always frustrating for individuals, when the government takes their property for public use, right? Also, say I'm lower income, right? And the government takes my property. Chances are my property is not worth a lot. So who knows what I'm going to be able to find as far as living arrangements go.
Yeah.
And also there are just a lot of costs associated with moving to another place that you're not necessarily compensated for. for example, say I'm low income, say I'm a single mom, and my neighbor watches my child who's 8 years old from the time my 8-year-old gets home from school till I get home from work. Then if I'm a single mom, is that a really nice arrangement?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I had to do those stupid worksheets. It's like
Yeah.
500 bucks.
So if the government takes my property and I have to move someplace else, what kind of child arrangements am I going to work out?
New ones.
New ones, exactly. The point is, who knows, right? But you removed me from an area where I had friends, I had neighbors, I had networks, I had people I could count on, and now you put me somewhere else. And how much compensation do you receive?
Nothing.
Nothing for that, right? And so, where do you think the government tends to build new roads? Through low-income areas or high-income areas?
Low-income.
Low-income areas,
We're
right?
not uprooting Hearst Castle over here.
No, you're not, right? And you're yeah, exactly.
Also, it's expensive.
Yeah, well, see now, and that's one of the tricky things about eminent domain, right? Is if the government's just trying to save money, then you put the road through a low-income neighborhood or a high-income neighborhood. Low income. And so it's a situation where if you're low income, you're frustrated and you feel like, geez, we never get ahead. The government's always passing policies which disadvantage us. But if the government were to make the road through the high-income area, what would you say as a taxpayer?
I am not paying my taxes until I make sure that my stable is secure.
Right, yeah. If you're a taxpayer, then you're like, how much are they spending on this road? They couldn't find a cheaper way to make this road? So in a way, if you're a policymaker, you're in a difficult decision. Right? Or you're in a difficult position, you're faced with a difficult decision. All right, now let me tell you the next kind of big concern with eminent domain. And that is that we've deviated from the original words of the Constitution, right? So the Constitution says, nor shall private property be taken for public use. Public use, right?
This is where they sell it off to private institutions.
Exactly. That's the concern, right? So, the case that dealt with this was called Kelo versus New London, Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And Pfizer wanted to build a new research park, a research campus, a research facility in New London, Connecticut. And they went to city officials and basically said, we'd like to build this research park here, and it's going to bring in all kinds of money, right? And so if you're on the town council, do you want Pfizer coming in and bringing in a research park that's going to provide all kinds of jobs and generate all kinds of tax revenue?
Of course I do.
Sure, you're like, this is going to be great, right? Well, there was a lady who didn't want to sell her house. Her last name was Kelo. And she said, forget it, I'm not selling. And Pfizer was, frustrated by this. And so, basically, the town used its eminent domain powers to kick her off her property. She filed a lawsuit, went to the court, Kelo versus New London, Connecticut, and the court said, New London, Connecticut, why are you kicking this little old lady off her property? I don't know if she was old at the time, I shouldn't say that. Why are you kicking this lady off her property? And they answered, economic development. All right. So the Supreme Court met and they ruled for Pfizer. They ruled.
Wait, they ruled against her?
They ruled against her.
Are you kidding?
I am dead serious. They ruled for Pfizer. They ruled for New London, Connecticut. And they said a town is allowed to use its eminent domain powers to take property, private property from one person, Kilo, and turn around and sell it to another private entity, Pfizer, for the purposes of economic development.
Where's Scalia when you need him?
Well, Scalia, I believe, dissented in the case.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, as did Thomas. And they said, the court in that case said economic development is sufficiently compelling public purpose, right, to justify the use of eminent domain. And this was frustrating because the Constitution doesn't say economic development. The Constitution doesn't say things like public purposes. It says public use, right? And so a lot of people do not like that decision. So do you know the Colonial Promenade Mall up on exit 238?
Oh, yes.
Yes, you're well acquainted with the Colonial Promenade Mall. Eminent domain was used in a similar way to put in that mall. Yeah, there were a lot of people there that didn't want to sell. The town used their eminent domain powers, kicked them off, and turned right around and sold it to the developer, who then wound up selling land to Walmart and the movie theater and that type of thing. Yeah, which people may like, you like those Buffalo Wild Wings. But the thing is, the people that live there, a lot of the time that property, my understanding, that property had been in their family for years. They had a lot of sentimental attachment to it. And even though it may not have been worth a lot in terms of resale value, they certainly wanted to hang on to it. But it was mowed down. That development went in, and there you go. And they were out of luck. Any questions on that? And now that Colonial Promenade Mall, especially Lowe's, Walmart, they're the biggies. There's also Ross over there. Mm-hmm. It generates a lot of tax revenue. Yeah, it generates a lot of tax revenue, and that's one of the reasons why Alabaster broke off from the Shelby County Schools and became its own school district.
Boo.
Yeah, boo. Alright, so. So any questions on eminent domain?
Well, I have one, but okay, so you know how Grandma and Grandpa's property is under that one law or statute of people who
That's Prop 13.
Prop 13. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, let's say they took the property for eminent domain purposes, mm-hmm. and they had to go buy another house. Would Prop 13 still apply to them?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think it would. I think they'd be out of luck.
Really?
But I think I could be wrong. I don't live in California anymore, but I think they changed that to allow people like your grandma and grandpa to sell their houses once and still be Prop 13 protected. But I could be wrong on that. Prop 13 is what fixed your property taxes is at kind of the original purchase price of your house, not the assessed value of your house. And it can only go up a certain amount each year, not huge shifts like occur in California. Anyway, we'll end there with eminent domain, and we'll see you guys next lecture. Take care. Bye-bye.